Okay, so today we're going to talk about bacteria and viruses. So what is a virus? Well, this guy back in 1897 termed the coined virus because he was trying to figure out what was happening to the tobacco plants. And so he looked at this and he discovered the virus, but he called it poison. He thought that it meant poison, which in reality, if you think about it, viruses are poisonous like to our bodies and to other organisms. So eventually this led on to finding out that the virus that was hurting these tobacco plants, they called it the mosaic tobacco virus. So some characteristics about viruses, they're very, very small. They're 20 to 400 nanometers. So if you look here, this is one bacterium. That is 750 nanometers. Our smallpox virus is 250, cold sore 130 nanometers, influenza, notice the shape, is a 90, cold virus is 75 nanometers, and yellow fever is very small. And then look at this red blood cell. Red blood cells, 7,500 nanometers. That's 10 times the size of the bacterium. So these viruses and these bacterium fit inside of the cell. That's just how small they are. Well, viruses are non-living. They're little particles, and the only way they can survive, not that they're living, but they can only survive to reproduce. That's their goal. They want to reproduce. They want to multiply. They have to invade a host. So what is a host? A host is a living cell that provides a source of energy for the virus, and so it can enable it to multiply. So it invades and multiplies inside the living cell. It's not a cell. Virus is not a cell, and it's not an organism. They're just particles that their goal is to reproduce and to do harm to the host. So viruses, they have to reproduce or multiply when they're inside a living cell. They're like a little parasite. We can say a virus is like a parasite because they have to have a host in order to survive, to live on a host, and to cause harm to the host. Viruses, we can group them by their shape, the type of disease they cause, their life cycle, and what type of genetic material they have, like DNA or RNA. Okay. So let's look at the virus structure. There's several shapes of viruses which are really important depending on the type of disease they cause. So a crystal shape would cause, like, this would be more of the crystal shape. And it would cause maybe polio and other viruses also. There's a cylinder shape, and it might cause the tobacco virus, which a cylinder shape is more like this one. It's kind of got some lines on it. But it would cause the tobacco mosaic virus, so that we would call that the cylinder shape. Okay, and then we have our spheres, which may cause the flu or the HIV. And we've got our favorite one, or my favorite one, because it's so funny looking, a bacteriophage. And they only attack bacteria. All structures of viruses contain the same genetic material. They contain a genetic material, either RNA or DNA, and a protein coat. They have to contain those. It doesn't matter what shape they are, they still have genetic material and they have protein coats. Viruses, how do they multiply? Well, we have active viruses, and we have what we call it the lytic cycle. The lytic cycle, that's our active virus. Well, what happens is, and we're going to take bacteriophage, for instance, and a bacteriophage attaches itself to the bacterium, and it injects its DNA or RNA into the bacterium. This bacterium, this virus, genetic material starts to take over the cell and begin to form into more bacteriophages. Then eventually they lyse, the word lyse, which means that they burst open, releasing new viruses. So they burst open, releasing new bacteriophages. So each of these little bacteriophages are going to go to a whole new cell, and they're going to start the process over again. And that is the lytic cycle. Okay, hidden virus, which is also called the lysogenic cycle. This is a hidden virus. There's a lysogenic cycle. All right, so the same little bacteriophage comes in and attaches itself to the bacterium. Well, it injects its DNA into the bacterium. And what happens to the DNA in the bacterium, the DNA attaches, the DNA is attached to the DNA of the bacterium, so it becomes one. And it stays kind of, I would say, dormant for a while. And it could stay for a couple of days, it could stay for years. And it's just kind of hidden in your body. And then eventually, after some time, the genetic material removes itself. Right here, it's removed itself from the DNA of this and becomes active again. And it starts producing more little bacteriophages. And then it lyses, which it bursts open and releases the new viruses, which these little bacteriophages will go either back and do an inactive, a hidden virus, become hidden virus, or they'll become active and go and infect all the cells through the lytic cycle. Okay, not quite finished with this yet, but treating a virus. Do we take antibiotics to kill a virus? Hopefully you said no. Do we take antiviral medicines to kill a virus? Hopefully you said no again. So no, antiviral medicines are not going to kill a virus. They're going to stop it from reproducing. So when we, and then we go on to, we get vaccines, which are made of weakened or altered viruses that trigger our body's immune system, our natural defenses. And the vaccinations prevent you from getting a viral infection. So we get maybe the flu vaccine, and we hope not to get the flu. We still may get the flu depending on the strain of the flu and what the vaccine's made of, or we may not if they got the right strain of the flu. So with the virus, if we do get the flu, we may take Tamiflu, and that's just going to shorten the duration of the flu because it's going to stop the reproduction of those viruses. Okay, so that's it for viruses. Look over your chapter, your section 1, and see if you have any questions. If you do, write them down, ask them in class. All right, let's talk about bacteria. So, bacteria is one of the oldest life forms on Earth. It's between 3.5 to 3.8 billion years old. It's the most abundant life form. In 1 little gram of soil, we can find 2.5 billion bacteriums. They're adaptable to all areas in the ecosystem on Earth. They're unicellular. They have a circular DNA. So if you see, look here, this is our little bacterium. And this is our DNA, its DNA. See, it's circular. But it doesn't mean that it has a cell membrane, a nuclear membrane, because it does not. If you think about a eukaryotic cell, that's us. They're prokaryotes, we're eukaryotes. We have a nuclear membrane, and we have our DNA in that. That is not a DNA cell. I mean, that is not a bacterium. Bacterium has a circular DNA. And you'll see that through in just a moment. Okay, so they're about the 10th of the size of a eukaryotic cell. Let's look at their structure here. They have genetic material. They have ribosomes. We have to have protein synthesis going on to be able to survive. Some have a cell wall. All of them will have a cell membrane. They all have some cytoplasm. And then the structures to make them move, their locomotion. Locomotion meaning to move, is flagella or cilia. Those are the 2 structures to help them move. Now when we look at bacteria also, there's 2 different types of kingdoms under the domain bacterium. There's eubacteria and there's archaebacteria. Eubacteria being just our everyday bacteria that we find anywhere. And archaebacteria are a bacteria that we find in extreme places. There are streamophils. Remember our lab that we're still working on. It has, we're doing the halobacterium, which is the love salt water. They can only survive in salty, salty water. So that is extreme. Some of them, archaebacteria, are found in the Yellowstone vents. Some are found in volcanic vents and deep in the ocean. Some are found in really, really salty waters and methane areas. Lots of really extreme places that other things cannot survive. So also these bacteria, all bacteria, vary in size. They can be extremely small to big. And let's talk about how they obtain food. They're autotrophs or heterotrophs. Being an autotroph, you're self-feeding. You produce your own food. Some bacteria use photosynthesis, which they get the energy from the sunlight to make their food, and some use chemosynthesis, which get energy from chemicals to make their food. So those are autotrophs. Heterotroph is like us. We are unable to produce our own food. We have to eat other things. We consume other organisms. Respiration. Let's talk about the need for energy to survive. So bacteria need a constant supply of energy to survive. And they can get this from using oxygen to break down their food and breaking down food without the use of oxygen. So if they're going to use oxygen, they have like an aerobic respiration. And if they break down their food without the use of oxygen, they have an anaerobic respiration. And let's also talk about the endospore formation. So when conditions are not favorable, like there's a drought or too much sun, too much water, and bacteria can't survive, then they form this endospore. An endospore is like a protective coating, and it protects their genetic material and some cytoplasm. And then when conditions become favorable and they're able to survive, they break out of this endospore and start reproducing. Okay, so let's talk about the shapes of bacteria. There's three main shapes. We have the coccus, or cocci, which is our sphere. This is it right here, circular. Bacillus, which is our rod-shaped. And spirillum, which is spiral-shaped. Okay, sometimes each bacterium cell live in colonies. They can live in a colony of 2, more than 2. We can call that diplobacillus. That's diplo meaning 2, bacillus living together. Or diplococci, 2 cocci living together. Okay, but they're each independent organisms. Okay, so let's look at their reproduction. They can reproduce in 2 different ways, through asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction, we call it binary fission. Okay, and all that is one cell multiplying its DNA into 2 different, I better make these circular, hadn't we? Okay, into 2 cells. Each cell is identical. Identical cells. And that is called binary fission. There's also conjugation, in which that is our sexual reproduction. Okay, and we have the flagella meeting up, exchanging genetic material, and then breaking apart. And that is sexual reproduction. Okay, so let's look at bacteria in our environment and our bacterial roles. Symbiotic bacteria. So bacteria live in or on other organisms, including humans, to aid their host. So they help other organisms, or they can live There's ways that they live in a mutualistic relationship in which, like a termite and a bacteria, the bacteria lives in the termite's gut, digests all the food, and the termite gives the bacteria somewhere to live that's safe. In symbiotic relationship, the bacteria helps the organism. So some live in the gut of herbivores, helping to digest cellulose. That would be our termites. Bacteria in the gut of humans, that's us, in our intestines, and they help in digestion. And they also produce vitamins. Bacteria on our skin and the openings. If you have a cut, some bacteria will help prevent infections by harm other organisms that are there to harm it. Bacteria can convert enzymes from nitrogen in the air to a usable form of nitrogen that plants can use. They're also decomposers. They can recycle dead organisms, releasing the nutrients back to the environment for the use by other organisms. So we need decomposers. Let's see what else. Pathogens. Bacteria can be a pathogen. Now when I say pathogen, it means it's disease causing. Could be deadly, maybe not, but it's a disease-causing bacteria. Only a small portion of bacteria are pathogens. These bacteria diseases, they produce these toxins that are released by the bacteria to cause these diseases. They can poison the cells and damage tissues. And also there's antibiotics. So yes, antibiotics kill the bacteria. That's what we want them for. They kill it. They have chemicals that either kill the bacteria or prevent the growth or reproduction. Generally, they kill it. Penicillin was our first antibiotic developed to fight the disease. That was an accident by Alexander Fleming in 1928. He accidentally discovered penicillin, which was revolutionized our treatment of diseases. But then it became where antibiotics became resistant. They were not being helpful to us because bacteria were developing a resistance to the effects of some antibiotics. And this problem, it is a problem and it's growing. So it's because of overuse and misuse. We use antibiotics to treat viral infections? No, they do not help viruses. They use antibiotics in livestock, which is cattle, chicken, pigs, and the antibiotics will show up in the milk and the meat. So, you know, that could be harmful to us, having to take all these antibiotics. Or getting antibiotics not directly that we need is in the animals, and that may affect us in the long run. People take antibiotics until they feel better, but stop before all the bacteria are destroyed, which is, you know, if you don't take all of your antibiotics that are prescribed, you're not actually killing all of the bacteria. And sometimes taking too much bacteria, also you're killing off all the good bacteria as well. So you have to be careful not taking so many of antibiotics because of that. Bacteria for the environment help clean up oil spills. We can put it in the oceans to help change that oil into a different form. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? I think we've covered everything, but I want you to check over your chapter, and if there's anything else that you need, you know, check that out. Building vocabulary. Here's some vocabulary I want you to look at. Bacteria. Leeuwenhoek could own one of the high-powered microscopes in use today. He would have seen the single-cell organism known as bacteria in detail. So there's cytoplasm, ribosomes. There's endospores, pasteurization, decomposers. Then we have our asexual and sexual reproduction, conjugation, which is a type of sexual reproduction. We also have flagellum, which is our flagella and cilia. Respiration, binary fission. That will take you to a little place. I hope it works for you. Okay. And some common bacterial diseases. Food poisoning. You get it from eating foods containing the bacteria. Properly cook and store foods. There's also a virus, a common viral disease, chickenpox, contact with a rash, inhaling droplets, antiviral drugs for adults, and there's a vaccination nowadays. This is just something to look at. Look at the section headings and visuals to see what you see about this section, then write what you already know about the diseases caused by viruses and bacteria in a graphic organizer like the one below. May help you. Little graphic organizer. It could be viruses are non-living and they're not treated with antibiotics. Bacteria are living, treated with antibiotics, and can be useful, cause infectious diseases. Okay.